So let's take a look at this Big Bang theory to try to understand what it actually says. Remember that for a long time, scientists thought that time was infinite and had no beginning. The first thing to understand about the Big Bang is that it says that time, in fact, has a beginning. Based on the work of Georges Lemaitre, Edwin Hubble, and many other astronomers, the beginning of time, and in fact the beginning of the entire universe, took place some 13.7 billion years ago. It was this event that marked the beginning of time, and although it also marked the beginning of our universe, it didn't look very much like the universe, at least not as we know it today. In fact, for a long time after the Big Bang, the entire universe was totally dark. There was no light. It would take some 300,000 years before parts of it began to glow. 9 billion years later, some of this glowing material had coalesced into the objects that we would call galaxies, stars, and planets. Our own planet, the Earth, was formed about 4.6 billion years ago, but once again, it would have been difficult to recognize, because at first it was little more than a ball of molten rock floating in space. It would take another billion years before the Earth cooled off enough to allow the first, very simple forms of life to appear. And it would be another 3 billion years after that for these first primitive life forms to evolve into things that we might recognize as animals. For example, the first fish appeared just a bit more than 500 million years ago, and the first mammals showed up about 0.2 billion years ago. Now, remember the way we used to scrunch our timelines so that we could get them to represent dates farther and farther and farther into the past? Well, now we have to do the opposite. We're going to take the last box on the right, the one that represents the final billion years on our timeline, and let's stretch it. Now we have a timeline that represents not the 13 billion years since the universe was created, but just 1 billion years, which means that each of these 10 boxes is going to represent 100 million years. So where do you think human beings fit on this timeline? Well, let's take a look. It's only during the last 100 million years or so that the species that we call human beings evolved from early species of primates. And it's only during the last 1 or perhaps 2 million years that we began doing things that you would recognize as human behavior, things like using tools or raising crops.